planning our activities, our advocacy activities, and we realized that we needed some kind of baseline on how people experience walking in Cork, how they feel about outdoor spaces for walking in Cork. So we needed some way of collecting user perspective. And we felt that it would be good to run some sort of needs assessment. And hence we thought about the survey. And therefore, the main objectives of the survey were to understand the pedestrian experiences of walking in Cork City and County, and then to identify areas of Cork that promote a positive pedestrian experience, or those that might limit a positive pedestrian experience. And this with the ultimate goal to certainly inform our advocacy activities, so particularly submissions or other events that we might organize, but also aid decision makers and start a conversation with decision makers about pedestrian experiences in Cork. So that's the reason behind the survey. And to give you a bit of a sense of the methodology, so we created an online survey. Initially, we really wanted to have both online and in-person data collection. We wanted to go around, particularly for the county, and ask people about their experiences. But we started data collection just at the start of the pandemic, and therefore we had to stick just to online data collection. And there were 4 main parts to the survey. So we asked people about the frequency with which they walk for either amenity or utility reasons. We then asked people to tell us places in Cork City or County and the outdoor spaces where they feel that walking is either a positive experience or a negative experience, and to tell us the reasons, to describe the reason why they feel that it might be a positive or a negative experience. And from that, we got some sense of perceptions of walkability. We also ask people to rate the walkability of their neighborhood, because there might be people who choose certain places for walking, but those places might not necessarily be their neighborhood. So we also wanted to get a sense of the place where people live. And in the end, just to get a sense of the profile of our respondents, we asked some demographic questions in terms of gender, age, etc. So as Orla mentioned earlier, we had over 1,200 respondents, and this includes both people who completed the survey in full or partially, and we are very thankful for all the people who contributed to this. And to give you a sense of the respondents' profile, so we had a slightly higher number of female than male participants. We had mainly young participants, so around 65% of participants were younger than 50, and mostly an urban sample. So if you look at these bars here, these are levels of urbanity. So we have in yellow the inner city, then we have city suburbs, the town, village, and countryside. With town could be whichever town around Cork City. And you can see the length of the bar is the number of people, respondents that belong to the category. So you see we have over 75% of participants from the city. We had around 22% of people who reported having children underage, and around 30% of respondents who told us that they either had themselves or had a family member with a condition that might limit their ability to move independently, so with reduced mobility. So this is more or less the profile of our respondents. And in terms of walking frequency, so let me walk you through this graph. So what we see here, we have 5 different types of walking. We have leisure walking, which is amenity walking, go for a walk, exercise, walking to go to work. Here is a big cover by the caption that is walking to do groceries, walking for other utility reasons, like going to the bank or the post office, or walking to reach or access another means of transport. And the column, so the vertical axis here is the average frequency of walking going from 1, never, to 5, every day. And the bars are the levels of urbanity. So here we go from inner city, city suburbs, to town, village, and countryside. What we can see from this graph is that our respondents were frequent enough walkers, particularly for leisure, so for amenity walking, and there were very few difference in terms of amenity walking. However, when it came to utility walking, so walking to go to work, groceries, or other utility, we see some important differences between those living in the city, particularly inner city, and those living farther away from the city. So you can see that the frequency goes down, and that is telling us that people in the city who answered our survey walk not just for amenity, but also to do whichever other day-to-day activities, whereas that decreases as we go away from the city, and that might be a matter of access, distance, access to public transport, or anyway, distance also from work or shops, etc., etc. So that's the walking profile of the respondents. Then respondents were very keen to tell us about the places where they like walking, more places where they like walking than places where they don't like, which is great. And they told us, they shared a number of reasons. We gave people the possibility to give us up to 2 locations, 2 positive locations and 2 negative locations, but some people were able to squeeze in even a 3rd location, which was great. So we had much richer data. And what we have on this slide is basically the main reasons for which people felt that a place would be good or bad for walking. So these are the main enablers of walkability and barriers of walkability that we identified. And broadly speaking, there were the main reason could be individual. So I go there because I feel good there, or because it enables me to be physically active, or because I am around other people that I want to be around. But also social and cultural reasons. So because it's family friendly, or because there are events, or because I can meet other people, or because it's age friendly, etc., etc. But the bulk, the main reason were really environmental. So whether people felt that they were safe from traffic, whether they felt that the place was accessible, the presence of nature, and a whole lot of other reasons, all related really to the environment, the physical environment, and how the physical environment is accessible and safe. And I'm going to give you a sense of the main enablers and barriers that came out for the city and the county. So here we have what we have here. So on the left, we have the top 5. This is the Cork city. We have the top 5 locations that were deemed walkable, where people felt that it was good to walk. And the top 5, now I've defined this unwalkable, but is really a bad term. These were locations where people found a number of issues when walking outside. So those that received the most negative mentions, let's put it that way. In this graph here on the right, you see all the locations that were mentioned in the city. And the green bars are positive mentions, and these are the number of people that gave the mentions, so the number of mentions. And the orange bars are negative mentions. Okay, so you can see that there were some locations that received mainly positive mentions, like Fitzgerald Park was the great winner, the big winner in this survey, and some locations that received, let me move this down, there you go. And some places that kind of received mixed reviews, let's put it that way. And if you look at the top 5 most walkable locations, what these locations have in common is mainly, firstly, the presence of nature, the presence of green spaces and the presence of blue spaces. But also these are places where people felt, a number of people felt that they could walk safely from motor traffic, and that they felt that where they could have enough space to walk, and it was accessible enough. So presence of nature, safety from motor traffic, and good levels of accessibility were the main enablers that people identified as reasons for choosing a certain place to walk rather than avoiding it. Whereas, and this is reflected then in the barriers. So the reason for choosing not to walk, or for not liking an outdoor space to walk there, were poor levels of accessibility, particularly in terms of quality of footpaths and the design of junctions and crossing points. And the presence of motor traffic, particularly the dominance of motor traffic, or how close a person would be to motor traffic. And related to that, the presence of other noise and crowding. And as a fifth barrier, a number of people mentioned poor social safety, so that let's say a low sense of social safety. And when you look at the areas that were reported as having a number of issues for pedestrians, we see that these are mainly urban areas inside the city. We have Douglas as city suburb, and all characterized by motor traffic or issues certainly with footpaths and junctions. However, the fact that these top 5 locations were reported as having a number of issues doesn't mean that those locations are just bad for walking. Some of these locations receive both positive and negative mentions, so there are some aspects of these locations that work well, the people perceive as inducing walking there, but they also have some barriers. And I'm going to show you a couple of examples. So one location, if only I can move the presentation. What happened? There we go. So one location that received, let's call it mixed review, was Patrick Street. So Patrick Street was the 8th most mentioned city location. It received 39 positive mentions for walkability, but 56 negative mentions. And the main enablers were what people seem to like about Patrick Street are the wide pavements, particularly the fact that Patrick Street is a place where you can meet other people, where you can see other people around you. So a place that promotes social interactions. And particularly during bus priority times, a place where people can actually feel safe from traffic. And this is mainly Patrick Street, but people would also refer to the pedestrianized areas that are around Patrick Street. However, because the bus priority times anyway are limited, and some people describe these priority times not being entirely enforced, a number of people felt that this is an area that has issues with motor traffic in terms of dominance of motor traffic, but also a number of people felt that an issue with Patrick Street is the slippery pavements, the slippery surfaces, particularly during winter time. And related to the motor traffic, a number of people described issues with the noise, but also with crowding. And here you can see that we have some mentions, some quotes from our participants' description, and you can see it's white space, attractive views, beautiful architecture, and plenty of shops. But then we have another participant say, well, slippery surface and the fact that the car ban is not being implemented. Okay, so it's a place that has good potential, huge potential, but it seems that some things could have space for improvement, let's put it that way. And another place of contrast, let's call it that way, is the Quays. The Quays in Cork, they were the 2nd most mentioned city location. They received 48 positive mentions, but 113 negative mentions. So these were the number of people who say, I don't like walking on the Quays, where 48 people say, I do like walking on the Quays. And the main reasons, now there are, Quays is a very broad category, so it includes a number of areas. So there were some areas that received more positive mentions, other areas that received mainly negative mentions. And what all people seem to have in common is the fact that they love the river. The Quays give access to the beautiful river that is at the center of Cork. And it is a convenient place because it's right in the center of Cork. And it does have, in certain areas, provides wide pavements, and it feels separate from traffic in certain areas like Gladsky, the Boardwalk, or Popsky, or Mary Elms Bridge. However, a good number of people felt that around the Quays, there are a number of points that have poorly designed crossing or pavements that make it less accessible as a place, as a space to go to. And a good number of people also felt that the dominance and the speed of the motor traffic is a strong barrier to actually enjoy the river, to go there and enjoy the river, and related to that also the presence of hazards. So a good number of people say this is a great location. It's just getting there. It can become actually hazardous for a pedestrian. So good things, but also bad things. Moving to the county, now I have to say, we had more people probably because of the profile that we have. So we have mainly city-based respondents. We had many more descriptions about the city than the county, but still we did. Actually, people mention almost double the amount of locations in the county than the city. And once again, we have here positive mentions. In this case, they are in blue, and negative mentions are in yellow. And here on the left, you can see the top 5 most walkable locations and the top 5 locations with issues for pedestrians. And what we see, so you can see here some names repeated. And this is because when people were describing places where they walk in the county, places where they like walking, they seem to describe mainly coastal areas or green areas, natural areas such as woods or parks or beaches. So places where they can be in contact with nature and where usually you would be away from traffic. So once again, the main enablers that emerged there were in the county were the presence of nature, safety from motor traffic. But the third most mentioned enabler, let's say the factor that would lead some people to walk there are the aesthetics and the fact that you would be in a pleasant surrounding, and also the quietness and the good air quality. On the other hand, people might mention the same location as a place where they don't like walking, but in this case, they would refer to the town, to the more urbanized area. And so you can see the Kinsale coastal area were the area that received the most positive mentions, but the Kinsale town received the most negative mentions. And this because it was felt particularly in OPSI ecologies. So particularly barriers that emerge in this case were, and very similar to the city, the presence of motor traffic, issues with accessibility in terms of quality of pavements and crossing points for pedestrians, presence of hazards. One thing that emerged, I only could stop moving the slides. One thing that emerged a lot in the county was littering and dog fouling as an issue for pedestrians, and in some cases also for social safety. Okay, and once again, so we have the same area, but we do have some spaces that are good for walking, some spaces that are not so good for walking, and that means that there is potential there, but there are also some issues. And if we look at Kinsale, so the coastal areas were those that received the highest number of positive mentions, particularly the areas close to the sea. Once again, because pleasant, presence of nature and safety from traffic. Whereas the town, people describe the town as being dominated by cars, cars that go fast. People found issues with the size, the width of the pavements and the safety of the crossing, and also littering and dog fouling as other issues there. I really would like to spend more on the county, but because of COVID and the issues that we have in data collection, we have much less from the county than the city. But the other areas are very similar. So when we think about Carrigaline or Ballycotton that were mentioned in the previous slide, the reasons are very much similar. And then we look at the data and we looked a bit at the responses, the descriptions given by people who would belong to vulnerable road users. So we look at the descriptions of people who say that they had underage children. We also look at the responses of people age 60 plus and people with reduced mobility. And we also looked at whether there were differences in descriptions between men and women. And what we found, now for people with children, one figure of note, and we were a bit surprised because you always think that when you do a survey, you kind of touch on an echo chamber, you have people self-select. But actually we found that out of we had 267 people who reported having children, one or more children, and 50% of them reported never walking to bring children to school, which we found was an interesting, quite in line with national figures, but very interesting. Less than 20% will walk every day, even though we have a very urban sample. And when we look at the enablers and barriers to walkability for people with children, traffic is really the main factor. So over 80% of people with children say that they like walking in areas where they feel safe from traffic. And on the other hand, around 72% mention places where they don't like walking, and they don't like walking there because of traffic, because of the dominance of motor traffic. When we look at older people or people with reduced mobility, we see that the main enabler for both groups is being in contact with nature. So being able to access green and blue spaces, that was felt as the most mentioned enabler. Whereas in terms of barrier, the most mentioned barrier for older people was, once again, the presence of motor traffic. For people with reduced mobility, poor levels of accessibility. Once again, when with accessibility, here we mean mainly quality of pavements and quality of crossing points. We found no differences between men and women. Both men and women preferred walking in places where they could be in contact with nature, they could feel safe from road traffic, and they could experience good levels of accessibility. So you see quite a consistent picture coming out there. There are really, most of the responses are around three things, really: traffic, nature, and accessibility. And as kind of a last point, which is the fourth part of the survey, which was about ratings of neighborhood walkability. In this case, we asked people to rate walkability of the neighborhood along 12 dimensions. And these 12 dimensions refer to access, to resting spaces, green spaces, public transport, or places where to walk. We also ask about perception of road quality, and also the overall positive experience of walking in their neighborhood. And what you see in these graphs, so the graphs are grouped by main domain: access, road quality, and experience. Here you see the main, each item of walkability, each aspect of walkability, and the data is stratified by levels of urbanity. So once again, you have inner city, city suburbs, towns, villages, and countryside. And the vertical axis, so the bars, are showing the ratings from 1, which is a very poor rating. So this would be, in my neighborhood, I can access resting spaces. A 1 would mean very much unlike my neighborhood. And 5 would be the highest rating, the most positive rating, very much like my neighborhood. So what we see here, just to give you a brief summary, is that overall, people, independent of where they lived, felt that access was adequate. There was an adequate level of access. However, ratings were much lower for access to resting spaces, and these across the 5 levels of urbanities, with the highest being towns and the lowest being the countryside. The people in the countryside gave also low ratings in terms of access to places where to walk, and this means places where to walk safely on foot, and also access to public transport. Whereas inner city was slightly poorer on access to green spaces, but overall very high. Okay. In terms of road quality, and road quality was around the presence of absence of obstacles on footpaths, the presence of physical hazards such as clutter, the cleanliness of the road, and the lighting. We found that overall the ratings, when we compare the ratings of road quality with the ratings of access, we see that they are lower. So in general, people rated road quality to be lower than access. The highest ratings, so the most positive ratings, were in towns. We should all move to towns if we want good roads. The countryside had the poorest rating for lighting, road lighting, and presence of obstacle, and cleanness was a bit lower in inner city, was rated a bit lower in inner city. In terms of the overall experience, this group of bars here is refers to an item where we ask people to say whether walking in their neighborhood felt like a positive experience, and you can see that we have overall positive ratings. We have also overall positive ratings for sense of community. So a lot of people felt that when walking in the neighborhood, they feel part of a community. We have very low ratings for safety from road traffic in the neighborhood, these across all levels of urbanity. particularly in inner city and countryside. And safety from antisocial behavior was actually the lowest in the, was overall high, but the lowest in inner city. Okay, so you see here that there are some variations there. It depends really on where you live. You see different things. And I think I've tired you enough, so I just want to wrap it up on the report. The report, some of you might have access, is very long. There is quite a lot of details, so there is a bit for everyone. But really, if when we finished the report and we thought about the main takeaways from the survey, we all were in agreement that that's really what people seem to like, at least the people who answered this survey, was having spaces that are green, anyway, that have nature, either green or blue spaces, where they can feel safe from motor traffic and that are accessible. So if you want people to walk there, make it green, make it safe, and make it accessible.